Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be reacting to
The Greek Civil War in 8 minutes.
Germany, Italy, and Bulgaria were forced to withdraw from Greece towards the end of World War II. But only 6 weeks later, Greece entered a new war.
well, dang.
Greece is the only country in Central, Balkan, and Eastern Europe where communists attempted to take power, but failed. This is the Greek Civil War in record time with hindsight.
Ooh.
Historians often recognize three phases of the conflict. The first started long before World War II was over. Greece was occupied by the Axis powers. The Italians surrendered to the Allies in 1943, and their territory was taken over by Germany. The Greeks fiercely resisted the occupation, and they did so in multiple forms. Just to simplify, you can divide the resistance groups into two camps, those supported by communist parties and those who were Republican. This brushes over all the nuances, but just for the sake of simplicity here, I'll call them communists and Republicans. The various resistance groups weren't united in their resistance and even clashed in some instances with each other while being occupied by the Axis powers. Towards the end of the war, the communists were gaining the upper hand. As the battle lines were closing in on the city of Berlin, the Germans were expected to surrender, and at this time across Europe, fighting and violence erupted. In Athens, the Germans had retreated just a few weeks earlier, and the country was liberated. The Greek police, with support from the weakened British forces, were struggling to maintain order. In the eve of December 3rd, Greece was going to make a
That is interesting, yeah, when the war goes on for so long and the war is over, it's kind of like a little chaos after that. Like, what's the government, like who runs what? It's a little chaotic, yeah, that's very interesting.
dramatic turn. Shortly after sunset, a crowd of angry civilians was marching towards the city center. The police tried to block them, but without success. The crowd broke through the police barricades and was marching towards the central square. The protesters were answering to a call from a communist resistance group. The Greek government had decided a few months earlier that they and other similar groups would soon fall under the leadership of the Greek government. This was signed into effect by the Prime Minister of Greece when he was still in exile a few months earlier.
Wow. So they kind of
Now,
just
upon his
decided
return to
we're gonna control it. Everyone's done. We're gonna control.
Greece,
Yeah, well, yeah, that power
Wow.
is up for grabs
Grabs.
at that point, yeah, so who's gonna take it?
the Prime Minister was enraged. As the protesters were raging and ranting outside, he was hiding in the bedroom of the royal palace. The police had trouble maintaining order. The protesters broke through the last barricades and stormed the palace, but only when they reached the monument of the unknown soldier, it turned vile. The Greek police received orders to shoot. There were also British soldiers present, but they were instructed not to interfere. They stood by as the Greek officers shot with live ammunition into the crowd, killing at least 28 demonstrators and wounding many, many more. This was the most dramatic and bloodiest of the December events. And with hindsight, this is the moment that Greece entered the Civil War.
Wow, that's crazy.
Wow.
Never knew Greece had like a civil war post World War II. That's so interesting. Wow.
Athens became a battleground between communist groups, government forces, and British soldiers. A few months later, the EAM was suffering tremendous losses. In Varkisa, near Athens, the leaders of the government and communist resistance parties came together. This was the first diplomatic effort to end the civil war. The agreement included 9 articles that described how civil liberties such as freedom of press and union forming would be reinstated. They agreed on giving amnesty for all political offenses, except those in common law against life and property. The Greek government promised to reform the national army in such a way that guerrilla fighters would be accepted. The communist guerrillas handed over their weapons, martial law was lifted, political crimes forgiven, and the referendum would be organized on the future of the monarchy. The progress was hopeful.
That's all they wanted?
But over the course of the next couple of months, all parties violated the terms.
Oh.
The government launched a campaign against the communists and frequently ignored the amnesty. The communists, in turn, didn't hand over all their weapons and started forming factions underground.
I would think so.
Greeks
I don't think you give
were
up
liv-
all your weapons. Because what if, they changed their mind? You're left defenseless. So I
In a
wonder what was the contract like? Was it everything that they truly wanted to proceed forward, or was it to pretty much create a facade to call, to take control at the end of it?
Well, I think, with the like ceasefires and whatever, it's a little compromise. You don't always get what you want. Neither side gets what they want. To kind of like in the middle, kind of sacrifice. One party sacrifices a little bit, the other party
But I
sacrifices a little
didn't see
bit.
what either parties were gonna receive.
Well, one of the parties would get the government, and the other party would get the the pardons and no prison time.
That's not enough.
That's-
Because I would think the other party would want to have say in the government. Or have representation to add their input. Because if you're just pardoning, okay, you're gonna pardon the crimes. You pardon the crimes not only for me but for you too. So what did the other party get?
I don't know.
climate of violence and repression. The Communist parties called for a boycott of the 1946 elections. With historically low voter turnout and many reported cases of fraud, the right-wing government won the elections far ahead of schedule, and as discussed, they restored the monarchy through a referendum. Many Greeks were opposed to the idea of a communist government, but they were also less than enthusiastic about the re-establishment of the monarchy. The country was drifting ever closer to an open civil conflict.
Booking.com has stays for absolutely anyone. Imagine.
In Albania, Bulgaria, and Yugoslavia, communist governments were formed, while the Greek communists were forced to operate underground. In 1946, they reinvented themselves. The remnants of the communist guerrillas renamed themselves the Greek Democratic Army and was now fully controlled by the Communist Party. They had 10 times fewer soldiers than the National Army, but they used hit-and-run tactics of guerrilla warfare.
That's a deceiving name.
Also, yeah, I was about to say, I feel like, coming up with the name like, Democratic Party, it's like, it's like
the
a
facade,
democracy.
yeah.
Because isn't like in Chinese the Democratic Party that's in, in like in office, they're elected supposedly like Chinese Democratic Party or whatever, but they're not really that democratic.
Even though they scored some notable successes in the beginning, they were unable to capture any major cities. The conflict was heating up and was getting more and more expensive. It became increasingly challenging for the United Kingdom, itself recovering from the war, to support the Greeks with money and supplies. Harry S. Truman, at that time, was the President of the United States. With the Greek case specifically in mind, he created the Truman Doctrine, a policy intended to aid parties fighting communist expansion. Greece received $400 million in financial aid, and the National Army received training from American officials.
That's a lot of money. Back then, $400 million? That's a lot of money. Now it's a lot of money, but back then, whoosh.
By itself, this would have decided the outcome of the Civil War, but the communist troops also made the disastrous decision to shift from guerrilla tactics to more traditional set-piece battles. Heavily outnumbered and outarmed, they made a speedy decline. The battle lasted until the last mountain stronghold fell in August 1949. Hey, what do you know about the Spanish Civil War?
Well,
I made
when it
another video that
ended.
explains in 7
Can you go to the comments? That was quick ending.
Well, it was Greek Civil War in 8 minutes, so that's what you get in 8 minutes, okay? My grandmother, who was in a Greek village at the time while my grandfather was fighting the communists, was warned in the middle of the night by her cousin, who was a communist, to get out of the village because they were coming in the morning to kill and raid. She traveled at night with 6 young children, 20 days, to get her to her family's village, sleeping in ditches during the day, traveling at night, just eating wild greens. What a horrible time. Oof. My grandparents ended up leaving Greece because of this war, to go to find work in Australia because of how hard it was to feed yourself back then. in Greece, let alone a young family. Even though it was the 50s, the infrastructure and bureaucracy in Greece was another 50 years behind at the time. Oh, wow.
That's rough.
There are some things that here to understand. What do you mean the upper hand against the Soviets winning elections? Something else? Oh, I guess just
Critiques.
yeah. Where Kisa agreement was not able to bring forgiveness, the hideous and unspeakable crimes of the guerrillas towards civilians could not be forgotten. I guess maybe that's why it didn't work out, because the crimes were committed against civilians. Wow.
Oh.
Very interesting. I didn't know Greece went through this.
Very fascinating. Guys, of course, let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Join the Discord. And as always, 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 share as much kindness as possible.